All right, good morning. I want to talk about something that I think for a lot of us in this room is, well, it's both really exciting and maybe a little bit terrifying. And that's the emerging role of what people are calling agentic AI in what we do in social science. Now, I'm not here to give you any final answers. Instead, what I'd like to do is just map out this new territory with you based on what the current research is telling us. It's very much an exploratory look. So let's get into it.
And I want to start with this. This is the very first sentence of the literature review that this whole talk is based on. Just let that sink in for a second. This isn't some future prediction. This is a real thing written by an AI about how AI is being used by us. It's a pretty clear sign that this isn't some wave that's coming in the future. It's already here.
Okay, so just so we're all on the same page, what do we actually mean when we say agentic AI? Because it's not just a fancy spell checker, right? We're talking about autonomous systems, systems that can plan for themselves, work towards a goal, and do it with very little handholding from us. And that word autonomy is really the key thing to keep in your head as we go through this. So here's the plan for the next little while. We'll look at this kind of recursive idea we just saw, the AI studying AI. Then we'll dive into the promise, the good stuff that's got everyone so excited. After that, we absolutely have to talk about the peril, the flaws, and the real dangers. That leads us straight into the validation challenge. How do we know any of this is real? And we'll wrap up by looking at what seems to be a very open-ended future. Right, let's start with the promise. Why is this tech spreading so fast? Well, the claims are pretty huge, and they really fall into two big buckets. First, just massive efficiency gains, and second, the potential for brand new ways of doing research. And the scale of what's being claimed, it's pretty staggering. An early study from Kusamegi and their colleagues suggests that using these large language models is linked to a productivity boost of somewhere between 36 and 60% on preprint servers. I mean, we're not talking about small, incremental improvements here. That's a massive leap. And to make that a bit more real, look at this table from a paper by Hall. A task that would take a trained human researcher, one of us, several days to do, like replicating an empirical study, was done by an AI in less than an hour. And the cost? About $10. When you see figures like that, you can really start to understand why individual researchers have such a powerful incentive to at least try these tools out. But the promise isn't just about being faster. It's about doing things in a totally different way. The literature is pointing to at least 3 new frontiers. First, you've got much more sophisticated agent-based models, where the agents actually use natural language. Second is this very contentious idea of silicon sampling, using AIs as stand-ins for human survey participants. And third, these interactive systems, where a researcher can guide lots of agents in real time. This is about creating entirely new tools to ask questions. Of course. And I suspect this is the part many of you are waiting for. All of this promise is matched by a huge amount of peril. And the same papers that are celebrating the gains are also full of warnings about the limitations, the straight-up failures, and the really serious collective risks that we're facing. So, this is a really crucial distinction that Garimala points out. It seems AI agents are fantastic at task completion, running the code, doing the statistical analysis, following the rules. But where they fall down and fall down hard is in information retrieval, making accurate claims about the world. And this is where we get the infamous hallucinated citations and made-up findings. It seems to be a really fundamental problem for any idea of full automation. And this brings us to a massive collective action problem. Garimala puts it brilliantly here. It might be perfectly logical for me, as an individual researcher, to use an AI to do a task I'd normally give to a PhD student. But if we all do that, the collective results could be catastrophic for how we train the next generation. I mean, how do our junior scholars learn the craft if all of the practice tasks are automated away? And that's not the only collective problem, is it? Just think about peer review. What happens when we're all flooded with AI-assisted papers? Our ability to signal quality could just collapse. And while some people talk about democratization, you have to wonder if the high cost of the best AI models will just create a new digital divide, separating the research haves from the have-nots. All of these dangers really bring us to one single core methodological question, the validation challenge. If we can't reliably check the outputs of these systems, then all the promises of speed and innovation, they're built on nothing, really. How do we actually know if what an AI tells us is correct, or if it even means anything? Let's just take synthetic survey data as an example. A study by Bisbee and his colleagues found that, yeah, on the surface, an AI's average answers might look pretty plausible. But when they dug deeper, they found huge problems. The AI data was too uniform, less varied than real humans. The stats were significantly different. And the results would completely change if you just tweaked the prompt a tiny bit. Their conclusion is really powerful. What looks accurate on the surface can be hiding fundamental flaws right underneath.
So this poses a really deep question for all of us, doesn't it? If a model can generate data that passes a quick glance test, but it completely falls apart under proper scrutiny, what does that do to our standards of evidence? As a community, how do we need to redefine what validity even is in this new world? And the challenge can be even more subtle than that. Afshar and their colleagues, they tried to replicate classic studies like Milgram's experiment, and they found something they call hyperaccuracy distortion. Basically, the AI models were great at getting the main finding, the headline result, but they systematically warped all the other, more messy parts of human behavior. It's like it gets the big picture right, but loses all the texture, all the complexity that actually matters. It's another tricky layer to this validation problem. So, where does all this leave us? Well, the literature is very clear on one thing. This story is far, far from over. We are right at the beginning of a new chapter. And it's one that's full of potential, for sure, but also full of these really deep, unanswered questions. We are looking at a truly open-ended future. Across the different papers, a few possible paths forward do start to show up. There seems to be a general agreement that we'll need more complex agent designs, ones with memory and the ability to reflect, not just clever prompting. And really crucially, there's a huge call for open source infrastructure, so we can actually reproduce each other's work and ensure some equity, instead of just relying on a few black box models from big companies. But the gaps in what we know, they are just vast. We have no real systematic studies on the long-term impact on the quality of our research. Is this AI-assisted work actually more replicable? Is it more impactful in the long run? We have no idea. We have very little research on how our institutions, peer review, PhD training, funding bodies should adapt. And maybe the biggest question of all, we haven't properly dealt with the epistemic side. What even is knowledge in an age where findings can be simulated? So I'll just leave you with this final thought. The general feeling in the literature seems to be that AI won't replace human researchers, but what it will do is fundamentally restructure the process of research. And if that's true, then our challenge isn't just about learning how to use a new piece of software. It's about deciding what our role is in deliberately and thoughtfully rebuilding the very practice of science itself.
Thank you.